SCJ has Lee Man Hee, right?
Yeah.
WMSCOG has An Sang Hong, and everyone has their person, right? Like, hey, you have to follow this person because this person is Christ, this person is God. Any deviation from this person, you're going to go to hell, right? So I guess what separates Reverend Moon from all these other people claiming to be the root of David, claiming to be the, arbiter of truth, the restoration, etc. What do you think separates Reverend Moon from the cluster of all these other people claiming to be the same thing?
Now that's a good question. Anyone in any of these groups who's honestly truth-seeking and finds out about the other groups, of course this question's going to come up. It's like, well, how do I know this is the right one? There's like 5 other Korean dudes that are saying the same thing. Oh yeah, and there's some other women that are saying the same thing too. Unificationism. Hak Jahan, the only begotten daughter. I believe she's the only begotten daughter. But guess what? There's Zhang Gyo-ja in WMSCOG. And there's some other people. So it's like, how do you do it? And so for me, as someone who studied history in college, I look at, okay, what was it like in Jesus' time? First of all, the Essenes were the religious minority, who the Great Sanhedrin viewed as the heretics. Where's the parallel? In Korean Christianity, who are the religious minority? It's everyone that came out of the 1907 Pyongyang revival and all those, that lineage of people and now churches. It's like my church, WMSCOG, we're all, the minority in terms of, popularity, followers, mainstream, quote unquote. So it's like, okay, parallel number 1. Parallel number 2, Jesus, most scholars would say, had some association with the, followers of John the Baptist, whether he was a disciple, which means like a really close follower, or just a regular follower, or just kind of following in the distance. But we know that there was some parallel there. So we know that from this lineage of religious minorities, the Essenes, for example, the community at Qumran, John the Baptist, comes Jesus, because Jesus' teachings are kind of similar to those. Same thing with Reverend Moon. He comes out from a lineage of people with theologies and teachings that are, similar to what's written in this Black Book. He's the first one to create a whole church out of it. That's his innovation. But he still comes from that kind of, flow of ideas. So we already have these parallels between Jesus' day and the day of, Reverend Moon, An Sang Hong, whoever. So people who were following Christ, they had to decide for themselves when they encountered him, am I going to follow this person who comes from this religious minority with totally different theology? Or am I going to say what most people are saying, which is, yeah, he has some interesting things, but he's kind of crazy, and I'm just going to stick with, traditional Second Temple Judaism. And so that's the question I ask myself. It's like, okay, I'm in a similar position as most people, the Jewish people, were in Judea, because I've come into contact with one of these groups. This is all just historical parallels. It's not even like, oh, religion or theology, or you're possessed by Beelzebul or whatever. It's like, this is just the historical parallels of the situation.
For sure.
So then it's like, what do I do? It's like, okay, there's Reverend Moon, there's An Sang Hong, there's Zhang Gyo-ja. It's like, okay, can I know for sure that Reverend Moon is the, second advent of Christ when Christ is working in relationship with him? Well, it was until he passed in 2012. Can I know for sure? Well, could people know for sure at Jesus' time? Not of their own accord, because the Gospels say very clearly that the only time people recognize him momentarily is when it's coming not from themselves, but from the Spirit.
Right.
That's very clear in the Gospels. No one recognizes Jesus for who he is while he's alive as a man on the earth unless there's interference from the Spirit. It never comes from yourself. And so, therefore, my takeaway is I can never, of my own accord, know for sure if Reverend Moon is the second coming of Christ, or if Hak Jahan is the only begotten daughter of God. I can never know for sure of my own self. I have to find out and know through my prayer, through my, reading the teachings. Did the teachings line up? Is this just, all made up? Are there big holes that are unavoidable? And am I having a spiritual experience that I feel God or the Spirit is telling me that he is and she is who they say they are? And my personal experience is, yes, I've had that kind of spiritual confirmation in prayer and, truth seeking with scripture that they are who they say they are. And that's what I challenge every believer of any of these groups or non-believer to use as the standard for knowing whether these people are who they say they are or not. Spirit and truth, as Christ said. There's the spirit, and then there's, okay, look in the scriptures. That's what Matthew did. Matthew was all about, let me look in the Jewish scriptures and see, does Jesus fulfill all these prophecies? And he says yes, and then he lists all of them throughout his gospel. Jesus fulfills what was written here and here and here, and he says this, this, and this all lines up. That's my attitude with, Reverend and Mrs. Moon. And this is what's good about you guys' channels, because in your guys' view, like Adam, your view is that An Sung Hong and Zhang Gyo are not these people because of what their teachings say, what they have done in their lives, their actions, and that's your conclusion. That's what everyone should do. And eventually, I think that's the only path, because there's no way to know for sure. Even with Christ, it's like, there's no way I can know myself if Christ was real or not. Maybe they just made this all up. Maybe it's just some legend that just got made into a bigger thing. Who knows? Maybe it was a cult over there that just happened to spread and become powerful. Or does my spiritual experience and searching the scriptures reveal to me, oh yeah, Jesus is who he says he is. And that's my conclusion. Jesus is who he says he is. No doubt, no question. He died for my sins. He is, the greatest man that lived and someone I want to follow. And that's kind of how I feel about Reverend and Mrs. Moon.
So if I could just push a little bit.
Yeah, go for it.
So, obviously, if there was a WMSCOG member on here, I could tell you 100% that they would say the exact same thing.
Yes.
They would say something along the lines of like, well, even though there's holes in the doctrine, even though, yes, they've used deceptive practices in the past, even though, yes, they've done some shady things in the past, they're still God, because, when they're in the flesh, they do these things to hide their glory, to make us not really know who they are, to basically test us, to make sure we're following them 100%, regardless of the situation, the whole thing. And so I guess, that kind of premise is not lost on these other groups, right? Obviously, the reason why they're still going is because they probably have had some sort of similar experience as to what you just described.
Could I add something?
Yes.
In unificationism, our concept of perfection is not that people don't make mistakes. So Reverend Moon, for example, he has a controversial teaching, which says, well, Jesus probably shouldn't have done so many miracles because that was creating, more negative conditions for him, because it was people, getting faith through the miracles rather than himself, right? Now, is Reverend Moon saying Jesus failed in anything? Did he say that, he's somehow imperfect because, this action he's saying he probably shouldn't have done? No. That's kind of the idea that unificationists have with Reverend and Mrs. Moon. It's that a mistake doesn't necessarily mean you are not perfect, or you don't have, because it's all about heart in unificationism. Heart is the most important thing. And unificationism goes so far to say is like, well, look at God's plan. Is God's plan a mistake? Because it didn't, work out the way he intended in unificationism. The ideal was not realized because of human free will. You could say God made a mistake, but that doesn't negate anything about God. So I would add that too, and I would also add unificationism has no such teachings which says, oh, they make mistakes or they're imperfect just to test you or to hide them. I've never heard that before in unificationism. They've never said that. It's all about relationship. If that's a WMSCOG teaching, then I would disagree with that. I don't, because, Jesus didn't do that. And that's why, Reverend and Mrs. Moon never said they did that or do that. I just want to add that point.
And I think, Moon's critique of that, I think it's not even, trying to understand Jesus' teaching and kind of thinking outside the box on it, I wouldn't say in and of itself is a mistake. And it's not really, it's not even controversial. Jesus kind of proves that point too, is like, because people are waiting for the miracle they're like, what are you going to do for us? What are you going to do for us? And he's like, nothing.
Yep. Where's your faith?
You know, yeah. So I don't think that's actually much of a controversial take, to be honest with you. I think it's pretty accurate. But I guess, you know, here's the hard time that I have is, you know, I've talked to WMSCOG members, you know, obviously if you read my comment section, it's all the same stuff, right? Like, well, who else is, you know, and this is a hard thing too, is like, they say, well, who else fulfilled these prophecies that we ourselves made exclusive to us?
Yeah.
It's like, that's kind of, you know, and I guess you could argue the Bible's kind of like that, right? Like, you know, those prophecies are exclusive to the Jewish people, right? Like the Gentiles didn't care about the Torah or the prophecies contained in the Torah, right? But, you know, and so the difference is, though, in my opinion, is you have a organization who says that this is God in the flesh. Like whatever you picture God as, the fullness of God, that is who is leading our church right now, right? Not some prophet that is ordained by God or something like that, who still has that human nature, right? And when we mean human nature, I mean, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. We have to rely on God, etc. We're talking about the fully omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent God who is dwelling in the flesh currently. And so that's where it's different, right? If this person speaks, and according to the Bible, if someone speaks and it does not come to be, what is it? It's a false prophet, right? And so when you have this deity in the flesh who is making all these prophecies, changing her mind, they're changing the doctrine, changing the truth is changing constantly, which defeats the purpose of it being a truth, that's where it gets to the point where they have to rely on my feeling, right? Because like I was saying before, well, even if we, you know, have changed this or have changed that, and even if before we did this and did that and this and it happened like we said it was, I still have that feeling, right? That personal feeling, that relationship with God. I'm not knocking having a relationship with God. All I'm saying is that the best way to find God, right? Because of course the Bible does say too that Satan can masquerade as an angel of light, and so can his servants, right? Even, you know, when it talks about the Antichrist, it's not really referring to being against Christ. It's referring to a pseudo Christ.
Yep.
Right, a similar Christ. And so I guess that's where I would challenge any WMSCOG member is there's many gods, there's many Christs, you know, and so I would argue, you know, I'm not denouncing anyone's feeling, I'm not denouncing anyone's realization, etc. But like what you were saying, test it with the scriptures, because obviously we all can't be right. You know, Reverend Moon can't be the second coming Christ, and Reverend Moon can't be the second coming Christ if An Sang Hong is the second coming Christ, right? It just can't work like that. You know, JMS, right? He can't be the second coming Christ if Reverend Moon is the second coming Christ, or Lee Man Hee. I mean, I don't know if he's actually the second coming Christ, but anyway, you know, this person, the promised pastor, or whatever, right? And so I guess my challenge would be to everybody. Because again, like if unificationism is the truth, then we should accept it as such. If Christianity just in and of itself, as the Bible says, is the truth, then we should embrace it as such. Or even WMSCOG, right? JMS, whatever the case is. If that is deemed to be the truth through fact, through history, through, you know, hermeneutics, through studying the ancient religions, you know, then we should accept it as such. I'm just saying, like, for everybody, we should be open-minded, right? Like, why is An Sang Hong? Let me ask you, Luke. Like, why don't you believe in An Sang Hong, and why isn't An Sang Hong the second coming Christ to you? That'd be interesting.
Yeah,
to hear.
Mainly because I don't know anything about really WMSCOG. I haven't been to their church. I haven't, you know, heard anything about him other than your videos. So,
would you be open to hearing about? It sounds like I'm preaching. Definitely not. Definitely not. But
I'm open to, like, I read, you know, Shincheonji's one of their texts that Lee Man Hee produced. I read it and I was like, unless it's a translation problem, this is just poorly written, and like, I no, like it wasn't quality enough
to be God, does it?
It just didn't seem like quality writing and, like, you know, teachings. I wasn't impressed. But it's like, there's two things there, right? Like for me, I don't know about anyone else in the Unification Church. I can only speak for myself. I would be totally open to going to a World Mission Society Church of God and hearing all about Ansang Hong and Zangyeo and all the teachings. The other thing, and same with anyone or any religion, like, because I'm a truth seeker, I want to see, you know. The other thing too is when you study religions from a more academic perspective, beliefs change so much, and we just apply, because it's the most recent one, our current hermeneutic to the past. For example, Yahweh is actually a derivative of Baal, which is a second-tier god, in the Canaanite pantheon. Like, if you really study it, it's like you had Elyon, and Elyon had a counterpart, Asherah. Below them was the second-tier god, the Bnei Elohim. One of them was Baal, and then that got equated with Yahweh, and then Yahweh got equated with El, and then it's like this whole kind of inconvenient, for the traditional believer who applies their current hermeneutic, inconvenient history of the development of religions, because it's messy. It's really messy. Israel, the Israelites, did not believe in monotheism, at least, and this is being generous, until King Hosea at the end of, in the 600s BC. That's so inconvenient to many people. It's inconvenient to realize that monotheism was kind of written into biblical texts, even though, in their actual time, they didn't really believe in monotheism. They believed in worshiping one God, but they believed all the others existed. So for me, it's like the history of religion is messy, and the same thing is true with these Korean groups. It's messy to hear about Pikarum and, Jesus head and, this leader and that leader and this theology. It's messy. It's not convenient for people of these groups. But the question is, what do you do with the messy history of religion, and, how, the creator God who's, out there, I believe, and, most people believe that are people of faith in these kind of religions, how does this actual living God manifest in human history? I have a theory about that. I'm thinking of making a video about it soon. But it's like, we don't know. And that's the whole point of truth seeking. We can't, people spend their entire lives trying to deal with all the messy history of the development of religion and their entire lives on theology. It's like, to put our current hermeneutic on things that are thousands of years old is, it's a bit short-sighted. So, but at the same time, it's like, well, I have to put my faith in something, otherwise I'm going to be a chaotic person, And so for me, this book is the best I've found so far. And if something better comes out, I'll look at it and evaluate. And if it's better, then it's better. Reverend Moon said that all the time. He said, find something better than the divine principle and, follow that instead. He always, in his public speeches, said, pray about it and decide for yourself. He always said that in his public speeches.